Amid the rising challenge of protectionism and unilateralism, China and Russia are getting closer, especially economically. During his current visit to Russia, Chinese President Xi Jinping will do much more than deepen his personal rapport with Russian President Vladimir Putin. On Friday, Xi will speak at an international economic forum in St. Petersburg, Russia's second largest city, where he will speak on sustainable development. Meanwhile, the two countries stress the importance of upgrading further their trade ties, which reached a record high of over $100 billion last year. So what's behind the surge of trade volume, and will more trade lead to more trust between the two nations? Joining me in our Beijing studio is Professor Rong Ying, Vice President of the China Institute of International Studies, and from London, Alexander Nekrassov, a former advisor to the Russian government. Gentlemen, welcome to The Point. Now, we were talking about Chinese President Xi to attend this international forum in St. Petersburg, and this year's theme is creating a sustainable development agenda. Why the relevance, Professor Rong?
Well, I think this theme subject is relevant in the sense that if you look at both at the domestic and abroad front, both in China and Russia, they are facing the major and priority issue that how to pursue a development in a sustainable way. I think as far as China is concerned, China has been advocating a kind of new sort of outlook of development featuring innovation, greenness, inclusiveness, and so on and so forth. For Russia, I think President Putin is also advocating a way that to push to bring Russia's development in a more sustainable way by reducing the over-dependence on energy and others. And internationally, of course, as we know that we have that anti-globalization, we have the unilateralism, you have so on and so forth. So the two presidents, the two countries sitting together to advocate, to speak up their vision of how to pursue global sustainability is very much significant, given the fact that they have such a strong political relationship.
Mr. Nekrassov, I wonder why do the Russian organizers choose the word sustainable development instead of globalization, if that is the kind of message they want to send out?
Well, I think that we have to understand that a lot of things that are happening in Russia concerning the President Xi visit and the forum are very symbolic. I must understand, I don't personally see much substance, neither in the talks between the two leaders or in that economic forum, because we really must understand something. The situation in the world has changed completely. We must basically, both China and Russia need to develop a new strategy of trying to distance themselves from the collapsing Western economies. We always talk about this globalization in a sense that everybody should be united, but I think that what I would like to see both Russia and China is developing a completely new strategy where the negative effects, and in your own program on BBC News before this program, we again learned about the huge printing of money in Europe, which will continue for 2 more years, meaning that the European economy is very weak and it's collapsing, apart from Germany maybe. The American economy is not that great at all. It's a virtual economy built on financial markets prospering while the rest of the economy is not doing very well. So I'd like to see both China and Russia really finding out a new model for themselves when they're under pressure from sanctions by America. And I can tell you that tariffs are also sanctions. You know, these trade wars that Trump is waging against other countries and China, these are sanctions as well, just like against Russia.
Okay.
They are intended to damage China.
All
and
right.
that's why I don't see this new strategy being actually beneficial to China and Russia, which still are very integrated into the Western liberal economics, which are crumbling.
Okay, 2 points, very important points. Professor Rong, what are your reaction to the fact that actually the sustainable development here, we're talking about how Russia and China should find ways to protect their economy from the wave, the potential wave of negative development, let's say, of the global economy, especially with the United States waging, you know, the batons of sanctions or tariffs on both Russia and China.
Well, I think for China, the sort of strategy or the thinking is very much clear. If we recall that President Xi, I think, made in his speech at the second international forum for BRI, he made it very clear that China will continue to open up in a wider way, and it will pursue
But
reform.
does that expose China? I'm sorry to interrupt. Does that expose China to even more peril from outside?
No, I don't think so. I think that here, as our Russian colleagues are saying that, arguing that, we have a kind of two versions of globalization, or two versions of how to pursue sustainable development, particularly indeed, I mean, addressing the impact or negative impact from globalization. The United States, the Trump administration, is advocating a kind of unilateralism, kind of American sort of first, and by putting pressure on both partners and also allies, tariffs and so forth, while China and also Russia, to some extent, are advocating to build an open economy based on rule-based and multilateralism.
Is that going to work? I think Mr. Nekrassov's point. I mean, Mr. Nekrassov, please correct me if I interpret you wrong. Mr. Nekrassov, is the rule-based economy seems to not be working very soon. Is China or Russia prepared for that kind of scenario, Mr. Rong?
Well, I think it depends on what kind of rules. The fact actually is that the United States is not happy about the rule that has been made, and it wants to change the rule for its own benefit. While I think countries like China and others, I mean even Europe, they said yes, the rule has to be changed, but that has to be changed through negotiation, through consulting, so that it will reflect the reality, not the interest of one particular country. So instead of sort of isolationism, instead of unilateralism, I think it would serve the interest of all the countries in the world, and the world economy in particular, that to continue to pursue a kind of open economy based on rule-based and multilateral. That, I think, the message is very clear. By the way, if you look at the agreement, the joint communique, I think the China and Russia that have been signed to build a relationship for a new era, I think the major part of it, yes, there are a lot of symbolism, but the substance is that they agree that they will put their economy in a more development in a more synergized way. They would like to bring their interest in a more integrated way, and they would bring their people in closer, so that they'll be working together to push their vision, their solution for world economy.
Mr. Nekrassov, your reaction, please.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that the one major thing that should change is that Russia and China should stop worrying what the West thinks about their cooperation and their closer links. Because even after this particular visit by President Xi, I know for myself that the Kremlin and Beijing will ask for their advisors, the presidents will ask their advisors to give them the opinions of Western media and Western experts. And this opinion will be provided. Now, this opinion might be false, by the way. This opinion is usually false. So I call on both China and Russia.
Why do you say this opinion is usually false?
Stop, because the Western media has created its own information area where it does whatever it wants. And Russia and China have yet to create their own information area. And we have to work on this very hard. Because most of the stuff you see in Western media is false, even about the economy, because the economy in the West is going for a very difficult time, yet you won't see it in the media. And that's one point. Second point is that if you take China and Russia as a joint entity, it is a self-sufficient joint entity. It has all the resources in Russia. It has the most powerful manufacturing base in the world in China. Technically, this entity doesn't need America and the West. But I'm not saying it should be cut off from them. I'm saying it should have its own strategy and then cooperate with the West on terms of equality, not trying to copy the West, which is falling apart, but having its own specific, economic, unusual, modern development strategy.
Professor Rong, your reaction?
Indeed, I certainly, I think, appreciate the views by our Russian colleague that the importance of China and Russia joining hands to pursue, to provide a kind of a wisdom or solution, one of the solutions, if I can say that, to manage or address the issue, the challenges that we are facing, particularly the economic field, and how to achieve a sustainable development. After all, this is a goal. I mean, we have the UN Sustainable Development Agenda, that the 2030, and it certainly needs, I think, China and Russia, but it also all other countries, including, I think, the countries in the West.
But what about the point he made? Yeah, sorry. What about the point he made that China and Russia should not worry so much either about the Western opinions or about, you know, being part of the West or copy the West in order to survive? Mr. Nekrassov, I think, was making a point there. Professor Rong. I think
it's absolutely true that China and Russia, given the size, given the history, given the importance, I think certainly we have never sort of copied or have to worry about the reactions or responses of other countries. But the point I would like to make is that we are living in such a globalized world, and we need, as our Russian colleague said, that is not able to cut off ourselves, rather in shutting ourselves. I mean, by just working together, I think it will certainly serve the best interest of ourselves, China and Russia. But equally important for the rest of the world, that to pursue a kind of open economy. That's exactly, I think, China, the visit, the significance of the visit, and exactly, I think, the message, I believe, when President Xi and President Putin is going to, when the speech is going to make.
Can China and Russia rely on itself, and maybe some parts of the world that are willing to economically cooperate with China and Russia, if the United States decide to decouple with the two? Professor Rong, very briefly. 10 seconds, please.
Yes, I think certainly if we could bring all the countries together, including the United States, that would serve better the world. But if the United States won't cut us off itself from the world, this is the business of the United States, and this has to be decided by the voters of the United States.
Many thanks to Rong Ying from the China Institute of International Studies and Alexander Nekrassov, a former advisor to the Russian government. And with that, we come to the end of this edition of The Point with me, Lu Xun. Thank you for watching. You've got the point.